In Native communities, we've dealt with a lot of hard shit for centuries, and like what's gotten us through is humor.
Yeah.
And that's the tool that we've had societally to like keep ourselves from going absolutely insane. And I think like I look at where I come from and how powerful that tool has been for my community. In many ways, I'm just trying to share that and saying it's okay to laugh about these things. It's like it's really messed up, and sometimes the only thing we can do is laugh.
That was Len Necefer. I'm Forrest Shear, and this is On Knowing Ongoing. Last year, I took off on some side quests to link up with a handful of friends to talk story. It was a chance to dive deep with some of the most influential individuals in my life. A central theme of all the conversations was the idea of mentorship and how it's shown up in their lives. We met up with Len Necefer at his home in Tucson, Arizona, then took off on a bikepacking trip through the Sonoran Desert. Len is one of the smartest guys I know, taught himself how to ski, an avid cyclist, filmmaker, meme lord, and founder of Natives Outdoors. He and I first met more than a decade ago for a trip near Bears Ears National Monument, and we've been linking up for off-the-beaten-path adventures ever since. On this most recent trip to the Sonoran Desert, we sat down to dig into his story. Len shares how his path through engineering and academia led to a job with the Department of Energy, but that he ultimately walked away from that role to pursue activism through storytelling. This conversation touches on everything from meme culture to renewable energy, with reflections on mentorship, Navajo tradition, and the sacred power of laughter. Let's get into it. Here's Len Necefer. Yeah, where'd you grow up? What was life like as a kid? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Tell us a little bit about your family.
Man, I grew up kind of a lot of different places. But for the first 13 years of my life, I grew up in a place called Lawrence, Kansas, which is like eastern Kansas, about 30 miles west of Kansas City. And my parents were teachers at a tribal college there called Haskell. And my dad had been a teacher in the Peace Corps and was in Liberia in the early 70s, and then came back, went into the Bureau of Indian Education, and my mom was, I think, doing her master's out in Haskell and like working there part-time. And my mom had grown up in the res, went through the boarding school system, and was like was the first in her family to go to college. And so yeah, I came along, was born in Kansas.
Incredible.
But yeah, I had a big Native community that I was plugged into there. And
so your early childhood was in Kansas?
Yeah. It was, I basically would be there, and then winter and Christmas time we go to my dad's family in Michigan, and then out here to Arizona in the summers.
Did you look up to your parents at all as a kid?
Yeah, I kind of, my parents are kind of like, I'm not good cop, bad cop, but just kind of had different orientations. My mom was very driven, very hardworking, and my dad was very laid back and also just prioritized sports and having fun and, having a balanced life. And so I think in some ways I took from both of them in that regard of, having, my dad basically getting me involved in sports early on and like encouraging me in that regard, and then my mom really pushing me in academic lanes and
okay, cool.
Doing that because I wasn't always the best student.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've done a little surfing together out on the coast, and you were mentioning your dad had kind of been out there, kind of doing some ocean stuff, and that probably translated into a lot of the sports that you've kind of dabbled in and been interested in, right?
Yeah, he was a surfer in the 70s. He moved out. He graduated college in Detroit and had a Volkswagen van and just said, I'm out of here. I don't want to live in Michigan anymore. And then drove out to California, and he has a story about having to make a choice. I forgot where he was, but basically making a choice of whether he was going to go to San Diego or San Francisco, and he chose San Diego. He was just like, it was a decision on the highway.
That's amazing.
And he became a surfer and did that for many years.
Nice. And then your mom ended up in New Mexico, and that's where you kind of went to preparatory school out there.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, kind of. My family's from like right around the Arizona New Mexico border, and yeah, so we kind of like bounced around on each side of that. But my parents got divorced when I was 13, and I moved out there to be with my mom and just like kind of have a fresh start with school.
What was it like going from Kansas to New Mexico? Was New Mexico more kind of hippie or laid back or
just different?
Just different.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I felt pretty quickly is like being in Kansas, I was often the only native kid in a lot of the classes I was in, and then I wasn't. And it was that moment of like having to figure out that part of my identity.
Yeah.
Because I think growing up in Kansas, I always kind of felt like an outsider.
Yeah.
And just never really felt like I fit in. And I'm glad I made that choice to leave, because thinking about my trajectory, if I stayed in Kansas, I don't think it would have been as good.
Yeah, there's not many outdoors things happening in Kansas. It's pretty flat.
Yeah, I would have been doing something very different than what I'm doing now. That's for sure. But it was, I think the other is just, it was, I hadn't never lived in that big of landscapes before, for a sustained period of time, which, when you're in a big landscape, it's super inspiring.
It really is. Yeah. Do you have any early childhood outdoor adventures or many memories of
my mom and dad were really into the outdoors. But that's kind of limited in Kansas with what you could do. But I have these memories. There was a state park like on the west side of town called Clinton Lake State Park, and it was just a giant lake and a dam that was built, and there was a bunch of like nature trails and stuff that you could kind of these woods that you could explore in. And I remember going out there with my dad a lot, and it was just kind of the
rad,
let's get outside, let's do something.
Yeah.
And as I got older, it was a place that became where I learned to mountain bike.
Yeah.
It was kind of these like rowdy trails.
I love that. Yeah, that's funny because I definitely did that with my dad for sure. It was kind of mountain biking, and we kind of had that connection together, which was super fun.
You did it with him, or
Yeah. And I've kind of always remembered that, and probably one of the reasons why I keep biking is kind of because I had that connection with him.
Yeah, because I think our dads are probably around the same age.
Yeah, I think
they're in the 70s, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And that was kind of like when they like the 70s was a big time for like the last bike boom that we had, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
pretty rad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my dad, he rode from Seattle to San Diego or Tijuana in the 70s. On Highway 1.
Whoa.
On like a road bike and a touring bike.
What a trip.
And I remember always having those stories of like, big adventure, big, something to look up to. And one of the memories I have of growing up as a kid is that he had a wall of bikes like this.
Really?
Yeah, and he had his old touring bike that he had from the 70s that he had taken on that trip, and it was like a Trek 520 or something like that. And but he kept it for a long time.
He did.
Yeah.
He kept it.
And so it was like kind of that every time I would go, I would know that was the bike that he did that on.
Insane. That's so cool.
It was fun. But yeah, it was inspiring to like have that as a relic,
Yeah, right? Does he still have it?
No. No, he's got rid of it years ago, but it's one of those, I kind of like look up to that of just, having these different tools that have these stories, or, I'm sure you have your boards that have their stories.
Yes, so true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there a board that you still have that you're hanging on to? Or?
I mean, I got rid of a lot of them. I have maybe kind of a first few boards. I unfortunately don't have the snowboard that I first split into a split board.
Oh,
which
crazy.
would have been rad to keep because it was all kind of in the garage, kind of like this table where you just kind of take a table saw to it, kind of hope for the best and kind of split it right down the middle. Oh, when it was like your only board and you're like, oh shit, Hope I don't mess this thing up.
Oh man.
Yeah, because
Did it ride the same or was it?
it was pretty heavy and pretty, you know, Flintstone style,
Yeah.
where you had to kind of piece it together. But it rode really good, yeah. And this is a time where obviously you kind of have to ride for whatever board company that you're riding for at the time to kind of show their logos and stuff. And not a lot of brands are building split boards, so.
Wow.
But it was a rad opportunity, kind of DIY a workshop that I know you like to wrench on a lot of things.
Totally.
So it was pretty fun, kind of doing it in the garage. And with skis, you have to kind of mount all the skis yourself, kind of with the bindings still.
Yeah.
And snowboards, there's the inserts for screws, but
Right.
it was the same deal where you had to just put one stance for the binding. And that was kind of the only stance you got. So you had to T-bolt it from the bottom, which is kind of wild. Yeah.
So, I mean, you could have gone for like the Bosch table saw sponsorship.
Completely right. Yeah, you could have for sure.
The Home Depot.
You totally could have, man. Yeah, because we were trying to figure out what the best glues were or epoxies, or you had to kind of like, I mean, because you split the board and then the inside edge is all exposed to wood.
Yeah.
So you either have to like lacquer that or maybe put like a little layer of glue on there or something to keep it sealed. But
lots of trial and error.
Lots of trial and error for sure. And we finally got it. And my friend that I was living with at the time, all of a sudden it was like, oh, bring your board over. Let's split it in the garage. Yeah, it's all our friends.
Yeah, it's split boarding. It's like, you're splitting your logs for the season,
Exactly. I know, man. Split board, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the wrenching thing, my sort of entry point into mechanical stuff was my mom taught me.
Oh, yeah.
How to change oil and change spark plugs.
So cool.
And I was like, oh, that's pretty easy. I can, do other things. And my grandpa passed away, who was
your dad's side?
On my dad's side, and he was a electrician at Chrysler.
Oh, no way.
In Detroit. And when he passed, he left me, in his will, left me all his tools.
No way.
And I still have a bunch of them. And the guy was a little OCD. Like, he was in D-Day. I think I told you he was like the first one off the boat. And I think he put his anxiety and whatever into organizing his garage and his tool shed. Mine's pretty organized, but not quite to like how he had it, because he even had like these spare or loose bolts. He would basically organize them by thread and by length, and it was like a hardware store.
Yeah.
And I remember he would just toil in the garage doing that shit.
Really?
And and I took that from him, and I was like, and I basically just kind of self-taught from there, of like learning how to do car mechanics and that sort of thing. And
yeah. And when you were in New Mexico, is that when you kind of got into car racing?
Yeah.
As a kid, and kind of
yeah,
from tooling on cars.
Yeah, I had my first car was a 91 Honda Accord, and I had bought it from my dad, and I went, and my first job was at Dairy Queen. And I was working at Dairy Queen one summer, and and basically just needed a car to get to work. I was like about an hour drive from work, and I needed to have a reliable piece of transportation, and that also meant that I had to be able to work on it. And so basically I had to teach myself, and I remember buying the Chilton's manual, which was like the paper book of how to repair the specific car and model that you had. And now you can basically find all of that on YouTube, which is amazing. But I remember I had this manual, I had these tools, and I began just like slowly building and replacing stuff. And then I realized that, with all this money I'm saving repairing my own car, I can actually buy like some sweet parts. And eventually I got a Honda or an Acura Integra, and that was the car I just started building into a race car.
Yeah.
And
because you guys were kind of in between Albuquerque and Taos, and you were kind of going up to Taos near the ski resort and kind of racing it up these mountain roads.
Yeah, totally. I was a part of the Sports Car Club of America, and they would have these autocross races, which were like slower speed in parking lots with cones, and it's timed. You get one, I would say one run. It's not multiple laps, but you just basically have one hot lap.
Yeah.
And you got to lay down a fast time, and you probably get like 6 runs in a day, 7 runs in a day. But I had this Acura, and it was like, my pride and joy, and I put a lot of money into it and built it really nice. But yeah, I think that was my first time at a ski area was Taos. And I was racing a car at like 9,000 feet, and the car had no power, and like it was a crazy time.
Insane.
Yeah.
I love that. And so, you were in New Mexico and then going to school there, and after prep school, it was on to college, post grad studies and PhD. What was the draw to academia?
Good question. I'm still parsing that one out. Yeah, when I was in New Mexico, I got into this international high school for the last 2 years of high school. But I was already a junior at that point, so I ended up going to high school for 5 years. But those last 2 were like amazing because I was at this international high school where there were students from like 94, 95 countries when I was there.
That must have been incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible and really eye-opening as a young person. And I think really shifted my idea of the world and like what could be learned and like perspectives and ideas.
Yeah.
It was life-changing in many ways.
Yeah. Would you say that all those kind of other kids and other people from around the world kind of help navigate you in kind of that schooling and to have a sense of more of a worldly outlook?
The world felt bigger
and
more complicated and less, because in the world, I think my sense of the world was really small at that point, as is with most teenagers. I wasn't very curious of the broader world and what was out there in different cultures. And I think after going and being around it, where it's just like that's the default, it made me really curious as a person. I think it made me curious about learning and just like seeking out knowledge for knowledge's sake sometimes. And I think it allowed me to kind of approach it on my own terms. But yeah, that was really formative, I think, definitely in how I see the world and the approach that I'm just doing now. And, I went from there and I went back to Kansas and went to undergrad at the University of Kansas, and it was culture shock. Going from that context to the Midwest, back to the Midwest to this place that I thought I was familiar with. And then when I came back, I was like, oh my God, I'm so different now. Like, I'm not the same person as when I left. And so the things that I enjoyed before were not the things that I enjoyed when I came back. And so it was like one of those moments where I was like, did I really make the right choice here to coming back? But, I went and did I became a mechanical engineer and did that as an undergrad. And it was awesome. I had some great friends and classmates that I made, and worked on the race car thing a little more. I was thinking about if I was going to go into aerospace. But, I think the bigger thing that kept drawing me back was just having this deep concern for the environment. And just like, climate change obviously was starting to become a bigger part of the discussion when I started college. And I kept thinking about how am I going to, I'm going to have to figure out how to be a part of the solution at some point in the future. And so I really tried to orient the work that I was doing towards that. And that really began with for example, like one of the things I did was the School of Engineering, which is about 3,000 people, didn't have recycling on campus.
Crazy.
And I said, there's got to be a way for me to do this and get paid. And, there was all kinds of, once you start getting into waste streams, there's all kinds of crazy shit you can run into, right? And so me and a friend started like a recycling program where basically we were putting out all these bins. We got a small grant. No, we didn't even get a grant. We just put our money together, put recycling bins across the School of Engineering campus. And we said, we're going to collect the aluminum, and I bet we can make money off of it. And we were, towards the end of it, we're collecting like aluminum scraps from the machine shop and like basically
Crazy.
once a week spending 4 or 5 hours and like netting like $800,000 or $900,000.
Why not?
And we would split it, and we're like, hell yeah, we were so proud of ourselves that we made some money,
Yeah.
but solving a real problem and also doing something that was sustainable.
Oh, completely.
And yeah, that was that kind of click moment where I was like, I should have paid attention to that entrepreneurial spirit a little bit more, because in the education that I got, I just never was taught about how to be an entrepreneur. It was just kind of like, oh well, those are those unicorns that exist, and
Right. Yeah, there wasn't a blueprint for that.
there's no blueprint.
Yeah.
And that's not what a lot of schooling teaches you to do. It teaches you to be a worker.
Oh man. Yeah. So you had a stint as a contractor at the Department of Energy.
Uh-huh.
We have to read this line from your bio and ask for some clarification. But it says areas for research focus have included material characterization of ceramic matrix composite, supersonic vehicle control systems, environmental risk perception, and energy system modeling. And then it goes on to, in his free time, Len is an avid mountaineer, cyclist, and amateur race car driver. So could we add, he's also in the running for the world's most interesting man.
I just, if I get really into something, I get really into something and learn
Love
it.
that. That's amazing.
Yeah, those material matrix composite, the aerospace stuff, like that was all kind of a few internships and co-ops, and sort of me pursuing different career paths kind of coming out of college. And a couple of that was like a internship and co-op at NASA Glenn in Cleveland, and it was awesome getting to be that close to that many like crazy smart people doing really cool stuff. But yeah, man.
So maybe the question is, why did you do all that, and then why did you stop doing it, and are now doing filmmaking, writing, running Natives Outdoors?
Yeah.
If someone were to ask you, how'd you get from the Department of Energy to meme lord of the Sonoran Avalanche Center?
Oh man.
What would you say? Trace the arc for us.
Where do we begin? I think I've always had that kind of as a Native person in this country, education has been used as a tool to control and oppress us, like with boarding schools and, you name it. My mom was in a boarding school system and has those stories. And so for me going through that system, I always had like that sort of skepticism of like, I don't know if this institution really has my best interest at, the forefront. I think like, and I've had some really gnarly experiences with racism and different institutions and like basically not being helped and kind of left out on my own. And I think really that kind of led me to question a lot about institutions generally. I think it also led me to question like sort of career paths and what's legitimate and what's not, because I kind of, you go into a higher education, you go to college, you go to graduate school like I did, you're kind of like implicitly told that these are like the acceptable ways to use your degree. And I just never really, I kind of would hear that and I was like, well, I need to come to that conclusion myself too.
Yeah, you weren't really drawn to that.
Yeah.
You wanted to figure it out yourself.
It was like I had to figure it out. I had to come to that conclusion myself, and that was true. If that was true, then that so be it. And so I went to grad school in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and great experience. Really, opened my eyes to how complex the world is in a different way. Especially around policy. Like it's just, man, you want to talk about a mess. Like just trying to make policy is really messy no matter how you cut it. And I think that gave me a lot of humility about like, I think what I could accomplish in the world. And I left, I graduated in 2016 and I had been working with the U.S. Department of Energy for a couple years, doing work in remote Alaska with like Native communities up there around adapting to climate change, other kinds of things across the West with tribes. And, that work took me to cool places, like in the U.S., remote, remote parts of the US, because one of the things I learned about tribes is a lot of tribes in this country tend to live in the most beautiful parts of the country.
So true.
And it's like, oh yeah, I get it. And I think that travel just kind of was amazing, exhilarating. And then 2016, I had taken a job with the US Department of Energy, continuing that work. And then Trump got elected.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell's going on, you know? Stuck it out for another year, was trying to make it work, and just was really unhappy. I think a lot of the sort of skepticism I had about institutions started coming up. And the final straw for me was when there was a whole push to open up, well, to rescind the protection on Bears Ears National Monument.
Yeah.
And then the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I said, I'm not going to use my knowledge and what I know to support this. Like I got to leave. I got to do something else. And so I started Natives Outdoors, and I mean, that's how we met.
Yeah.
Was like kind of me figuring out what we were going to do. And, you know, we started off doing apparel, and then that quickly became, you know, that was like a very expensive endeavor. And then, you know, really just started focusing on stories, because I think one of the things that I realized is that we as people are hardwired to think about story and to think about personal narrative and personal experience. And, you know, mountaineering and being in the mountains is often being in these really remote places and bringing back the story to tell to others, right? It's not like a basketball broadcast where you can see people climbing the mountain or skiing the mountain in real time.
Yeah.
You have to rely on these like narratives that come back. And I really saw the power in that.
Yeah. The long format storytelling you're doing is incredible.
Yeah.
With you and Natives Outdoors. And a lot of us have seen kind of on social media this, these Inca woman, kind of ice climbing and climbing, which is pretty rad, you know? So there's such a rich history of, you know, natives doing these incredible things, you know.
Yeah.
It's been going on for forever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and you've been doing that. I mean, I remember seeing, I think the first film I saw was the one you did with Jeremy Jones, and you got in that avalanche in Japan.
Yeah, totally.
I remember seeing that. I was like, holy fuck. That was like my first memory of like remembering your name. But that was a moment I was like, holy shit, that guy seems cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we learn from the craziest things. And, you know, sometimes it takes being in an avalanche or, you know, some kind of crazy aha experience where you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The natural world can slap you around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And, you know, you learn from it and want to share that knowledge with others.
Yeah.
On protecting these places, but then also surviving out there and being safe.
Right. And I mean, that's almost like, you know, being in these landscapes is like, we're not the first to be in these places. Maybe in wintertime in some contexts, we definitely could be.
Yeah.
But, you know, being out sort of in these more remote parts of the world and coming back with a story is something that like we as humans have done for millennia.
It's incredible, right?
You know, and it's like being a part of that thread of knowledge and experience, right?
Yeah, I'm so drawn to that, you know.
Yeah.
You know, there's such incredible history, and some documented, some not, and it's passed down generationally, you know, through families, and so cool.
And what was that curiosity for you? Because, like, you know, we spent time in the mountains and done some fun stuff, but it was, I think what set you apart in a big way is just you had this like really deep well of curiosity.
Yeah, you know, I think so, and I think it comes from a quest for knowledge and learning and wanting to always continue to expand that and be open, and so, you know, wanting to learn more. But I think it's the trying new things, which really drew me in, and I think that was wanting to take that leap of faith as a professional snowboarder and kind of moving into the splitboard realm, which kind of opened up experientialness of being in the outdoors, and kind of opened up the opportunity to work with brands like Patagonia and brands that have such depth and history in mountaineering and climbing that for snowboarders, that's such new territory for us. So I think I was really drawn to wanting to, you know, do something outside the box and really being able to take that that knowledge as a whole from, as a bigger picture and, applying that to me and kind of my journey, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially the business side. I mean,
Yeah.
Your dad was also has an incredible history.
Yeah.
And I see that influence on you in a big way,
Yeah.
What kind of experiences did your dad give you, or what was the things that how he raised you to like have that curiosity about the world?
I think just his ideas of where we're kind of going as a human race on this planet, and how do we, survive and sustain growth, and in return protect these wild places and raise awareness about how our world's changing so drastically and so quickly. I think really, I drew insight from him in that regard, and wanting to apply it to sports and kind of my snowboarding. And I always say that snowboarding is such a powerful vehicle that we can kind of use it to create change on a bigger scale. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell me what your dad David does, or his what's his job? Because I hear that he wears many hats and kind of does a lot of different things.
Yeah. So my dad went to school, PhD in environmental science. So his background is primarily environmentally science driven, with an emphasis on kind of solar and wind. And he's kind of run the gamut of working for Toyota, helping with kind of the first gen Prius as a scientist, to being a consultant for Google and a myriad of companies around California, and kind of developing working with brands to kind of create their grant funding, and making sure it's going to good outlets and folks that are going to provide change for long term. Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's like the Burning Man connection.
Yeah. My dad's based in the Bay Area, and if you look at the Bay Area now, obviously it started very kind of hippie influence. It was also the place where the Sierra Club was founded. So it has this, multifaceted environmental whole earth catalog, arm. And then it has now this very tech, branch to the Bay. And then it also has art driven, which is Burning Man, and kind of very forward progressive, people that are kind of striving in the art world. So I think he's at a place where he's kind of blending science, art, and tech. And I think that's such a cool area where we can kind of, take bits and pieces from all those and blend them into one, and, spit out, Burning Man, in a sense, where it's like people that are, coming up with new ideas that are on the forefront, that, some of them are out there when you kind of add Elon into the mix, but a lot of them are ideas that, are profound. And if we can, get there fast enough, ways to change the planet for the better. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that sort of influence of art in your work.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've talked about and bonded over. And my mom was an artist growing up. For me, that was like my influence. And I think that was the the questioning I began to have in grad school, was, I think, with those prescribed tracks of, these are the ways that you can be successful: as you work in industry, you work in government, or you work in academia. That was like the 3 paths. And I said, well, what if I want to just like do my own thing? And it's like the 4th path. And, part of it was, I grew up with my mom, who was a photographer, a jeweler, and like, we had very deep influence of that native culture and history on my mom's side. And I think that always kind of drew me into like thinking about the work that I would do. And it was never cultivated or encouraged. It's like, oh, go be an artist if you want to be broke or poor. It was kind of the message I got. And, that was where, I have a lot of interests and inclinations there that were never really developed in those institutions. It's not until I left and like kind of paved my own path that it's like I began to cultivate that a bit more. And like, the part of the things that we've worked on is like the stories that, we wrote, like I wrote in The Alpinist, and, a lot of those stories were written based on the conversations we had. And like build, and writing a story is an art form too, in a different way, and telling a story or telling the story about the mountains is an art form as well.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think we're at kind of like that perfect time here where you add in social media. Mm-hmm. And also all of a sudden it's this new platform for art in a form that, with you when you started the Sonoran Avalanche Center, for example, that was such an incredible, sarcastic, but such a creative way to, be like, that we can have fun here with this.
Yeah, and very, very tech forward, and like thinking about, or technology forward, and in thinking about what will an avalanche center look like if we lose all snow, right? And what will an avalanche center look like if it heavily uses AI? And all the forecasters have lost their mind, and it's been fun because it's created this sort of outlet to use AI, video generation, music generation. Like we have an album on Spotify, which I'm sure you've seen. Making art, making culture in a way, is like kind of what I look at. Really, what Sonoran Avalanche Center is doing is just creating culture, creating discussion, and poking and being sarcastic and being funny and like kind of just doing all these different things, really just to spark conversation, to spark thinking. Because I love snow, but it's something that is increasingly getting threatened. And
completely, how
do we talk about climate change in a way that isn't so doom and gloom, but kind of fun, and just a different take. And I think what was funny is, I was like, oh yeah, of course Forrest would get this. This would make sense in the world that you come from, and it totally does.
Yeah, and you personally, you've been on a meme farm.
Yeah,
quest totally. Of like,
oh man,
creating these incredible, forward-thinking, memes that a lot of us like. It's so refreshing, and we're always like, need to go to Len or Sonoran Avalanche Center's page to be like, oh, I need a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
It's
social media is so interesting because it's like one of those things, like if you don't feed the fire and feed the algorithm, you kind of are penalized for it, right? And it's like there's only so many. I can only wax poetic so long about the mountains or my adventures before I just get tired of it. And I was like, I'm just going to share all the funny things my friends are sending me. And like, I'm going to curate it. I'm going to be an art curator. But I kind of like to think about what I put out into the world as like fresh tortillas, right? We had some fresh tortillas last night. They're wonderful, but they probably wouldn't taste very good today. Right. And like memes are kind of the same thing because humor is very contextual. Humor depends on like the context and what's going on, and eventually like there's not a whole lot of evergreen funny things that will last, right? So I put them up, leave them up for a day, take them down, because they're kind of ephemeral and they don't really need to exist long term,
Yeah, it's not just about all the LOLs.
Yeah,
maybe there's a bigger mission that we're trying to get you here.
And I kind of use that to feed the algorithm, but when I want to talk about something more serious, the algorithm's like the pump's primed, and then when I do post something that's a little different, that will take people off get people's attention in a different way. That's kind of how I try to use that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's stupid. It's fun, but it's like a stupid hack to like try to deal with an algorithm in a system that I have no control over.
All right, what's next? What do you still want to do in storytelling and adventuring? In government, in race car driving? You've been doing some great work with the Colorado River and doing some raft packing up in
Yeah.
Alaska. Some really cool projects.
Yeah, I'm like kind of on a sabbatical right now. I just been pedal to the metal for a bit, so just kind of taking it easy and doing home projects. And today was like kind of the day, actually the first day I was thinking about, oh, like I wonder what I want to do next year and what do I want to make happen. And last year was filled with a lot of rivers, kind of by necessity, is like that's often the best way to tell these stories, because right now the Colorado River is having a big compact renegotiation of how the river gets split and used and managed for, the next 100 years, because it's a 100-year agreement that's coming up for renegotiation in a year. And so water has been central to that. And so I've been using pack rafting and cycling to, we have the Outside series that just came out, and telling the story about the river. And there's been a lot of interest and attention there. And so I've put a lot of work there. And the work in Alaska is kind of more on the climate angle. Is we went to this place called the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, which is like incredibly beautiful and literally has the worst name possible. Like, and it was kind of one of those things of like, I don't really, I think on a policy level, I don't really like symbolic wins of like changing a name or, removing a statue is like kind of feels surface level. But this is an instance where I think my mind got changed a little bit, where it's like, oh, I could see why that can matter. Is that you have the NPRA, the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, and it just got opened up for oil and gas drilling from a lease that came at the end of the Clinton era, beginning of Bush, and it's going to get developed. And it's in this like really remote part of northern Alaska. And I was like, man, like if this place was like the Arctic Wildlife Preserve, there's actually the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve kind of, not too far east of there. If it had a name like that, it probably would face a little bit more opposition, but probably a little more work there.
Way better name.
Way better name, NPR and the Petroleum Reserve. But I think we're going to try to do some more work there. It's just incredibly expensive to get up there. And again, the pack raft was the easiest way to get around, because the rivers, like if you walk across tundra, it's like the slowest walking, most arduous walking you can do.
I imagine they take forever.
It takes forever. And the rivers are the way to get around in the Arctic, or skis and snow. But that just enters, like, that's a whole nother level of complexity with logistics. And, but yeah, probably a little more focus on those two things is what's going to happen. And, it's always fun to just kind of do something that's a little bit outside of that realm. So kind of looking around and just like taking a break and just kind of looking around the world and just seeing what's out there.
Nice.
Just being curious.
Yeah, completely. Are there any leaders you're looking to now, or any that have mentored you over the years? I'm sure you've met Deb, and Jade's doing great work.
Yeah. I think I had a chance to meet Kit Delorier.
Yeah.
Recently.
Kit's cool.
And I got to show her around, and she's someone that I've always had a lot of respect for. But one of the things that we connected on that was really interesting, that I was like, I don't know what I have in common with Kit. It was actually, she spent a lot of time in Alaska and the places where I'm going and that sort of thing. And that's been really cool to talk with her about that.
In the Brooks Range.
Range and all that. In terms of other types of like other leaders I've been kind of looking up to is, I've been really like, I've always had a lot of respect for Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
As a complete kook and a madman in some ways.
You kind of got to be, right?
Yeah.
To kind of get out there and do something different.
Yeah. And, I look at the context in which he was raised. It was like post-war Germany, like really, basically like in a country that had lost a war and like massive poverty that he was in. And basically in a place that was having to reinvent itself in the wake of authoritarianism and all these other things. And it just made him a really interesting dude in terms of just like how he sees the world and the stories that he focuses on. And I think I'm really interested in his perspective, because I think right now we just have a lot of, how I'm talking about a lot of question about our institutions, like broadly speaking in our country, and like questioning of our leaders. And I think especially if someone like that can help if we look at the absurd and kind of focus on the weird parts of this, I think it can give us insights of like how to move forward.
Yeah.
And so I think his work and his ideas have been really, I don't want to say inspiring, but just like sort of thought provoking.
Yeah, completely.
And I think really what I'm at least in when I'm looking in for leadership and ideas is just things that can make me think different and like make me question even what I believe or what I take to be normal. Those are the folks I'm looking for these days.
Yeah, I think I'm on a similar path of the questioning realm. I think is, even more important in our day and age of really thinking what, drives us in our values and our beliefs and being able to apply it to what we like to do and to the places we love, right?
Right.
And we've done quite a few trips already, and it's been some really great times, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we could just briefly talk about this trip we did in Arizona outside of Flagstaff up to Dukoslid. And
Dukoslid.
Yeah, Dukoslid.
Yeah.
And Dukoslid is one of the 4 sacred peaks of the Navajo. It's the one in the south.
The west.
Oh, it's the western one. Yeah. And have you been up at other ones?
I've been up all 4.
You have?
Yeah.
Rad.
Yeah, I was thinking, oh yeah, a crazy trip. That was a trip that we got my van stuck in the mud.
We did.
Right after you asked the medicine man to fill the pipe again with more tobacco. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if we want to do this. But that was a fun trip, man. It was kind of like, very quick, but it was like, it kind of, everything worked, even though there was a few moments where it was like, I don't know, it's like, might not come together. Like it all worked. Like it all kind of fell into place.
It really did.
That? Yeah.
It really did. And we were able to bring the whole crew with us with Connor and Aaron. And it was just such an incredible time to be up there with you guys.
Yeah. It was like early March.
It was early March. I remember it was like raining and we were driving the van kind of through that area onto the Navajo reservation and then getting to the mountain. And I remember like preparing for this trip and coming down from the Utah at the time, and I was like, what is the weather going to be like? It might be kind of warm, like kind of, mellower temps than it was in Utah. And I just remember it being like almost like Alaska in Arizona. And we were like totally, wearing all the layers we had, our puffies. Everybody
it was like 50-mile-an-hour winds up
it
the top.
was,
yeah.
And it was all rhymed out, and it was almost like this Northwest Arizona vibe. And we just ate this incredible meal up on the top that you guys brought, and the conditions.
Yeah, my mom came out for that. Remember?
She did. Yeah.
Oh, that was really fun. Yeah, we ate those enchiladas.
Yeah.
Wow, and I remember that day because it was like full on like wind, and it was cloudy, and the mountain was socked in, and we were kind of walking up in fresh pow.
Yeah.
And I remember it's like, this is gonna be so much fun to go ski down this, and we went and got to the top.
Yeah.
And then the ride down was fun. That was fresh pow, and then it cleared up.
Such fun turns. There was fresh snow, and I think that it was such a cool trip. Because it was this opportunity for me to learn from you guys.
Yeah.
And kind of my process of being patient. And that really, speaks to being in the mountains for so many years now, splitboarding and doing more expedition style trips all around the world, and really using patience in your favor of, you really have to time it. And, when the stars align, you can have the most incredible run of your life. But at the same time, you need to kind of pull back and have that patience and listen. And I think going with you guys to have a blessing ceremony before our journey up the mountain was something that I was like, oh man, I got to go all ears and eyes open for this one. And ended up, passing this medicine, smoking this pipe around, and was totally new for me. And it was like there was nothing left in no sage and tobacco left in it, that I was like, oh man, maybe we should do a refill here. And meanwhile, we were like on a journey that, took us all the way into the night. And then we did the mountain the next day.
Yeah, that was a crazy. Got stuck, and then we weren't stuck for long. Right. And then the snow line or the rain line came down low enough so that we had POW.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't get ruined. And then we had a movie screening that I had to be at that evening after coming off the mountain. I remember we just like ran down, got off the mountain as quickly as we could and made it to the screening in time.
Exactly. That was insane. That was such a cool experience. And it's been so rad to see your development and progress skiing, and where Connor Ryan is now. It's so
yeah
rad.
I mean,
All you guys.
we started at the bottom of just learning. I remember I taught myself to ski with YouTube like when I was like late 20s, and it's like been going on adventures with you, doing the little things, like even like one of the link ups that we were doing there for a bit was in Taos.
Yeah.
In New Mexico, which is a place that we're both connected to and means a lot to us, but it's just like that kind of interesting backdrop where it's this way of moving outdoors that we both love, with this cultural context and backdrop that's just really unique, and a mix of just different peoples and perspectives. You have the hippies, you have the New Mexicans, you have the Pueblos, you have the Navajos, you have the Apaches, and it's just like this mix of people in this like really beautiful part of the world. And it's been interesting to do that because every time we go, it's like kind of that new, there's always something, it's like the same, but there's always something new there,
Yeah. Yeah, there really is. Any Navajo lessons that you feel compelled to share with others? I mean, a little bit, we talked a little bit about in some of our trips and bike riding together, how mentorship can kind of go both ways. It's kind of with where we are now, and kind of, filling in with our elders on what's cool, and, how we're kind of recreating these spaces differently than they were.
Yeah, I think a lot of the sports that we do, especially like mountaineering and that sort of thing, it's still a really deep mentorship model. Like you can learn on your own, but I think the learning's a lot quicker when you have someone that's with you and in context. And I was thinking about that. I was talking to someone about they were just wanting to learn how to ski. It's like, you can do it, just find someone that will. I think you said patience earlier. Just being out there and being patient with you, and like being a part of the learning process with you, because, with learning, you have to be really patient with yourself and with others. And especially when you're teaching, you have to be patient with the person that you're working with. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that even in that moment of waiting and being patient, that's still learning for yourself too. And, I think that's like kind of being on both sides of that coin is important. And I almost think about it like mentorship is like this idea of like seasons, of like you have this seasons in the northern hemisphere. I was realizing seasons are very different depending on where you're at in the world. But in the northern hemisphere, you have, this intense period of growth season, and sort of the sustaining into the fall, and then then you fall into dormancy and then sleep, or like kind of going to rest in the winter, and then you have this like budding and growth. And I think in many ways, like the relationship of mentoring is like you do have those periods of lulls and those periods of growth, those periods of sustaining, and those periods of fresh starts. And I think like mentorship is an interesting thing, because like when we first met, I really looked up to you, and I was like, he knows a lot. But I think in some ways we kind of like, we're now like kind of these peers that learn a lot from each other, and it's a dynamic because we each bring things that, to the table that, a lot more about the mountains and tech and these other things that I don't. And, I bring these other things about policy and whatever, but it's like kind of that space of where we kind of like are like tending that garden of knowledge and of learning together. And I think that's kind of where when I look at mentorship, it's just like being willing to share that journey with someone else on that sort of seasonal cycle of growth and learning. And that's a very Navajo way of looking at it. But it's also just like knowing that it'll change, and being willing to change with the change.
Yeah,
Is
you have to grow, and you have to be. You don't. I mean, there's resistance to growing, and there's things that I feel hold us up. But I think there's a lot that we could learn from the youth, and still the lineage of storytelling, and carrying that through is
Yeah,
important.
that's a big one. Yeah, it's been fun, man. We've done some fun stuff. Yeah,
We
God.
really have.
Oh man, I just think about that. I was thinking about the uh what trip was that? It was like the Taos trip that we took, and it was right before COVID and
I remember that.
everything shut down. That was a really fun. I think Aaron probably had COVID at that point.
I think Taylor did too.
Taylor did too.
Yeah.
What a crazy time.
Could you dive a little deeper into what you meant regarding mentorship
Yeah.
in a Navajo way?
Yeah, like one of the this idea about seasons and
Yeah, we talked a little bit about
yeah.
being where we are, and we can almost mentor elders. It's
Yeah.
such a both way, right?
Yeah, it's a two-way street, because I think one of the things that we do as people as we get older is our thinking becomes more rigid, and we need to find those opportunities to engage with folks whose views or thoughts on the world are less or they're like less rigid and
Yeah.
more plastic and formable. And I think that's kind of where like the younger older dynamic is big, or like even just more experience, less experience,
Yeah.
know, like those sort of dynamics are always important to maintain. And because, we have to be humble about what we know and how limited that is in the scheme of how much knowledge there is out in the world. Is like, I have a PhD, but I have a very deep, limited knowledge of this one area. And that's not what they teach you in that school. When you get your PhD, they not teach you that humility. But I think, going into the mountains and just like getting my ass whooped multiple times and just having that humility instilled in me by the natural world is something that we've done as people for thousands of years and living in these landscapes. And
Yeah, I thought it was incredible what you mentioned about mentorship in regards to seasons.
yeah, and that's another perspective that's different, is that we don't see the world as linear time. We see it as circular time. So, every October 1 we return back, like at least on our calendar, we return back to where we're at. It's like a return to center. And you basically do these cycles, multiple cycles, and you're not really on this linear path, which is a lot of what the Western world sees, and kind of defines what success looks like and what, career path looks like, whatever it is. It's always on this like trajectory where you're headed. But we don't, I think in the Navajo worldview, one of the things I always have to return to is we don't see the world that way. It's like, we go through these like seasons and cycles, and yeah, the things might change along the way, but we're going to kind of go through those periods of growth, sustenance, decay, rest, dying in our own lives. And basically we just keep going around and around. And, that's kind of, especially at that mentorship, is that sometimes our circles and cycles will intersect at important points in our learning. And I remember, like just thinking about that of when I came out to I flew out to Santa Barbara, and we drove down to Greg's place in Baja. It's like I was not in a great place, you were not in a great place, and we were like, but we're gonna go do this crazy thing together. And it was like, for me, like totally out of left field. Like I had surfed a few times and done that sort of thing. I had no idea who Greg Long was. And then I realized afterwards, I was like, holy shit, that man taught me how to surf. But we went and had this like crazy experience with the Native Like Water crew,
Yeah.
which was just like,
Really cool crew.
you gave me an indigenous experience I was not I was not ready for, or did not know it was coming. But it was like kind of in this lane and context of surfing, which was something that you deeply cared about and like has made a big part of your life. And I think about that of like, we had that first encounter of going up Doko's lead. And because of that, on your cycle, you pulled me into this other part.
Yeah.
And I think that's always interesting is like now, like I kind of think of like where are we at now? It's like this is a reflection period a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit of growth. And we're having this conversation in winter. Well, it's not going to feel like winter out here in Tucson, but it's winter here. But that's that place where I think like we've seen, we're kind of coming to the end of one cycle and now we're kind of looking out and reflecting on where we've been.
Yeah.
And now looking at where we're going.
Yeah. And in a sense, you can kind of bring up Hoka Hey to where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what does Hoka Hey mean?
Well, Hoka was barking. Yeah, so my dog, who is probably you could hear barking in the background. Her name's Hoka, and it's so funny because Hoka Hey is a phrase that is a Lakota phrase. It's like a war cry.
Yeah,
Lakota. And it means it's a good day to die, which literally it's like it doesn't literally mean that. It means like everything is right and orderly in the world, and like if you were just to disappear into the sky or whatever, you would leave the world in a good place. And it's kind of I love that phrase because it just kind of reflects that like moment of contentment and happiness, right?
Yeah. Very true.
It's a good day to die.
I love it.
But yeah, that's been a lot of those adventures is like when you're in that moment and you're just like feeling it and you're just there in that place. That's that Hoka Hey vibe.
Love that.
Yeah. I wish we had something like that in Navajo.
Oh man. Yeah. I love what's the show? Not Reservoir Dogs, but
Reservation Dogs.
Reservation Dogs is so good.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's such a good one, and just so many rad references in there, and it.
Yeah.
Almost similar to Natives Outdoors, where you guys have just brought in just such a refreshing, way of storytelling and through
fresh
memes
take.
And such a fresh take. It's so good.
And that's been, I think when I think about how do we. Like if we don't evolve as people and change and meet the times, we're going to become irrelevant. And it's hard giving up and who we are or learning or like, I don't want to say having ego death, but change is hard. Learning can be hard. And I think especially with how we just try to approach story is bringing other people in, other perspectives, just like new takes.
Yeah.
Because it like I always kind of worry about my thinking getting stale.
Yeah.
Or getting like less flexible, which inherently it will as you get older. But I think having that willingness and openness to change is something that I think I strive for and try to meet the time when it's needed. And I think just really when I think about, where we can have, like with the stories that could be told and just like how we can rethink the society we live in, or even like, how do we meet this time and place right now to deal with the climate is like, in many ways, we have to like let go of these ways that we've thought about living, but the future is not going to be worse if we, it won't be worse if we let it be. We can make it better. And I think that's been one of the, and I think about my environmental work, I'm so deep in the policy, I know way too much about some of these fucking things. It scares the shit out of me. But in that training, they don't then teach you to have the imagination of how things could be different. And I think that's like in our conversations and like you forwarding the things that your dad has been reading or thinking about, like that's where the art, the culture, the sort of more imaginative freeform thinking that isn't based in like right here, right now, the facts of now.
Yeah.
It's like, let's imagine a world. Let's do this sort of thing. That's been like sort of recentering that I think is like so needed.
Completely. And that's maybe the exponential curve that, we need to get to. And it's through creativity and it's through mentorship, and it's through connection that we essentially, can get to this next plane of a world where, where we imagine where we can still do these things for decades and eons to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially snow. I mean, there will be snow around. I just hope more people can enjoy it, because
Same.
that's a part of the water cycle that so few people have access to and can see relative to the population. And, even with rivers, a lot of people just kind of just don't treat rivers as very important or very neat, snow is sometimes, like, I remember living in Pittsburgh, snow was seen as an inconvenience. The river was seen as a thing that is like where pollution goes and where our sewer drains into. And I think one of the things is being able to move in those landscapes and to be on that water. It like changes that perspective of like this thing that is we take for granted is this like incredible vehicle for personal growth, for story, for all these other things,
Yeah, and where we are right now in the Southwest, I find that connection so profound with, thousands of years of Anasazi to Navajo to Hopi. There's so many incredible civilizations that, have disappeared, but then some are still going, and how we can learn from those. And, I think that really, leads to water and food scarcity and how we can provide for the future, right?
Right.
Yeah. Which is wild to think about.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, especially on the tech side, that's kind of where we as humans went on a different trajectory than the rest of the primates, is because of these things, but also our ability to make tools and technology. And I think for a while there I was like I don't want to say anti-technology, but a technology skeptic. And I think as I've gotten older, it's like, it's not all bad. And I think that's kind of where, like, at least in my native community, we're kind of like tossed like all bad. And there's been technology that's been used against us that's really bad. But I've also seen that, like, at least I think about in native communities, like how differently AI is used, and like how differently I'm using AI to like be this engine for humor, to like add levity to these conversations around climate or whatever environmental issues, because in native communities, we've dealt with a lot of hard shit for centuries, and like what's gotten us through is humor.
Yeah.
And that's the tool that we've had societally to like keep ourselves from going absolutely insane. And we're at this point now where we have really crazy political times. We have really crazy climate issues going on. You name it. We're like exposed to a lot of things. And what you do see is this sort of proliferation of memes and like humor online of like, this is an easy way to be able to talk about a hard issue, but in a way that isn't so heavy, right? And I think, like, I look at where I come from and how powerful that tool has been for my community. In many ways, I'm just trying to share that and saying it's okay to laugh about these things. It's like, it's really messed up, and sometimes the only thing we can do is laugh. Because if we're not in a place to be able to deal with fixing this problem or whatever it is, we're like too emotionally drained. That's not great either.
Completely. So going forward, more memes, more laughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. First,
more mentorship.
More mentorship. I think just doing things that are going to places with intention, going to places for a reason, going to places to learn. I think has been increasingly more like being more deliberate with where I go. I think I've had this kind of, for a while there, I was like, I want to ski this peak and do this and this and this. And I kind of was like, why am I, I had this moment of like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I learning from this?
I think that intention is really important.
Intention's really important. So a lot of more intention. So whatever that looks like.
Thanks, Len. It's been an epic conversation, and look forward to more adventures to come.
Man, yep. One day it'll be one of us pushing each other in a wheelchair. So.